In my previous video I knitted the bed wrap from the 14th issue of Passap magazine, and today I will knit the neckerchief from the same publication. The instructions for the neckerchief are on the same page as the bed wrap. Both projects are incredibly exciting to knit and I'm eager to share them with you. Before we get to the knitting machine, I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to my amazing supporter. Your membership will help me create even better content and it motivates me to keep pushing forward. Thank you very much and hope you like this video. Now it's time for knitting. First, make sure the racking handle is in its lowest position. Raise 130 needles on the front bed of the machine, 65 to the left and 65 to the right side of the center. Place the edge springs on the last working needles. Now raise 130 needles on the back bed of the machine. Place the edge springs on the last working needles. You have to observe the needle rule. It should look like this. Set both locks to N and make sure the stitch size is appropriate for a racking cast on. Insert the orange strippers and take an eyelet with waste yarn. Rotate the racking handle one full turn anti-clockwise and knit one row. Rotate the racking handle one full turn clockwise and knit one row to finish the cast on. Reset the row counter, set both locks to BX, increase the stitch size to the main stitch size and press both right arrow keys. Remove the orange strippers and insert the black ones. On the front bed, raise pushers under all working needles and put them in working position. Raise pushers under all working needles on the back bed and put them in resting position. Rotate the racking handle anti-clockwise to its highest position. Now knit 20 rows with the waste yarn. Reset the row counter. Move the lock to the color changer and take the main yarn for the project. Now we have to start making the increases on the left side of the knitting. Move the leftmost stitch on the front bed one needle out. Then hang a purl bump in the hook of the empty needle. Now raise one additional pusher on the front bed and align it with the rest of the pushers. Remove the edge spring on the back bed and move the leftmost stitch one needle to the left. Then hang a purl bump in the hook of the empty needle. Raise one additional pusher on the back bed and align it with the rest of the pushers. Now knit 4 rows. Don't reset the row counter. Make the increases on the left side the same way. This time I will show you up close. I will first move the stitches and then I will raise the additional pushers. Make sure to do the steps in the same sequence every time to lower the chance of mistakes. After the stitches are transferred, I will raise the pushers. Now knit 4 rows. Don't reset the row counter. Continue increasing the stitches the same way. I skipped a bit of the video, and as you can see, the last working needle on the left is needle number 95. Now I will knit the last 4 rows. The row counter should be at 80 rows. You can reset it to prepare the machine for the next section. Move the left edge spring on the front bed, then take the leftmost stitch and move it 1 needle in. Place the edge spring on the last working needle. Then do the same on the back bed. Move the edge spring and decrease 1 stitch by transferring it to the adjacent needle to the right. Don't forget to put the empty needles and the pushers under them out of work. Now knit 4 rows. Don't reset the row counter. Make the decreases on the left side the same way. This time I will show you up close. Decrease 1 stitch on each bed first, then put the pushers under the empty needles out of work. Now knit 4 rows. Continue repeating these steps until the leftmost working needle is needle number 65 or until the row counter is at 80 rows. Don't forget to put the pushers under the empty needles out of work. If you leave a pusher above the rail, the machine will knit on the corresponding needle. Now I'm knitting the last 4 rows. Reset the row counter. Decrease 1 stitch at left on each bed the same way as in the previous step. Put the pushers under the empty needles out of work. At right on the front bed, put 70 pushers out of work. I will first put them in resting position just to double check if I have counted them correctly. Now move the right edge spring and use the yarn from the eyelet to cast off these 70 stitches. The first stitches are always the hardest one to cast off, then it becomes an easy task. I have a video about this cast-off method, so I will leave a link in the description if you want to see the process up close. Put all empty needles out of work, then move the edge spring to the last working one. Move the lock closer to the knitting, then pull back the yarn coming from the cake to tension it again. Now knit 2 rows. Don't reset the row counter. Move the right edge spring on the front bed and decrease 1 stitch by transferring it to the left. Put the rightmost pusher under the empty needle out of work. Now put 71 pushers out of work on the back bed of the machine. Both rightmost working needles must be opposite to each other, so I will start from left to right. Now move the right edge spring on the back bed and cast off these 71 stitches the same way. You can pull the yarn from the feeding eyelet to make the process easier, but don't cut it. After casting off the stitches, make sure all empty needles and pushers under them are out of work. Now knit 2 rows. Don't reset the row counter. Now you have to decrease 1 stitch on each side of the knitting. First I will decrease the stitches on the right side, then I will decrease the stitches on the left side, and finally I will put the pushers under the empty needles out of work. Now knit 2 rows. This time I have to decrease stitches only on the right side of the knitting. Put the pushers under the empty needles out of work. Now knit 2 rows. Now decrease 1 stitch at each end on each bed. On the left you have to decrease on each 4th row and on the right side at each 2nd row. I will share a tip for keeping track of the process easily. Since we are knitting in a U shape, when the yarn is coming from the rightmost stitch on the front bed, you have to cast off stitches on both sides, and when the yarn tail is coming from the rightmost stitch on the back bed, you have to cast off only on the right side of the knitting. Now knit 2 rows. The yarn is coming from the rightmost stitch on the front bed, so I have to cast off 4 stitches in total now. Here is another tip. If you don't want to move the edge springs every time, you can simply hold the knitting and pull it slightly when knitting the row, or just put some weights on the edges. This will help you to speed up the process. Now knit 2 rows and move the rightmost stitches 1 needle to the left. You must have 1 stitch on the front bed and 1 on the back. Put the pushers under the empty needles out of work. Now knit the last 2 rows. The row counter must be at 80 rows. Pull out some yarn from the feeding eyelet and cut it. Thread it in the double-eye bodkin tool and sew off the remaining stitches. Sew off the stitch on the front bed first, then sew off the stitch on the back bed. Be careful because the knitting will drop when you take the last stitch. Remove any weights that are attached to the piece beforehand. Now the knitted piece should look like this. I made a racking cast on so the piece is sewn at the bottom. Either you have to make an open tubular cast on at the beginning or you have to cut the waste yarn in the middle at this stage. In other words, cut only along the cast on row. Now the piece should look like this. Fold the piece to make a pointy edge as shown in the video. It should look like a neckerchief. The edges are curly, so I will steam iron the piece to kill the acrylic yarn. When ironed, the acrylic yarn gets very soft and nice to the touch. To make up the neckerchief, fold the ends in half, then start from the outer edges of each end and make a seam from the end to the place where the last of the 70 stitches is cast off. You will easily notice that by looking at the edge of the fabric. The seam should end next to the last small hole along the edges. Now you can see how the piece should be sewn. I haven't removed the waste yarn because there are still live stitches in the center. To close them, I will use backstitch. And now the piece should look like this. After you close all live stitches, you can remove the waste yarn. Now the piece should look like this. You can see which part is not sewn. Lastly, weave in the remaining yarn tails and the piece is ready to be worn. This is what my seam looks like. I'm sure yours will look better. You can show me by sending me a photo on my email, Facebook or Instagram. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed today's project. Now have a nice day and see you in my next video.